Okay, let's get started here. So I figure you're all sitting way back there because I've been sick now for the last week and you don't want to get what I have. Assignment number 6 is due December 9th at noon. Today we will finish the internships section and hopefully start the accreditation section. Again, for our next class, we will meet during the normal final exam time, which is on Tuesday of next week at 10 a.m., and we will just have a normal class. Please remember to complete the course evaluations for this class. I checked last night, and only one of you, of 9, have actually completed it. I would appreciate if you complete it before the final exam, because there are some things I want to say in the final exam there, or final exam time period, some things I want to say that I don't want to let that influence your course evaluation. Okay, so are there any questions before we get going here? Yes.
On the assignment, as far as our CV goes, can we just use the format of your old CV?
You're welcome to use as much of my format as you want, but you can always use a different format too. It's just, I've laid out some key areas that I think you need to include, and so please include them. Now, obviously, for most of you, for example, you won't have the publications, and that's fine. Just exclude that from the CV. Don't put publications and then put none in there. Any other questions? Okay. So let's talk some more about these internships. Hope all of you have seen the internship announcement, or set of internships that American Statistical Association has put out there. Again, just as a reminder, there will be more that are put out there. You just got to go back to the websites to find them. So we were talking about, first of all, how to obtain an internship. And we talked about CVs. Now let's talk about the interview. And again, this is based upon my experience of getting internships, but also the experiences of other students that I've talked to who have obtained internships. And typically what I've seen is that there are two purposes of these interviews, and the first is to assess the statistical knowledge, as you might expect, but also to evaluate non-statistical qualities as well, such as communication skills. And very often, and this is I think one of the things I was always surprised about through my interviews, is that very often there's not a whole lot of really in-depth statistical discussions. What they're often doing on these interviews, people who are interviewing you, is evaluating your communication skills. And they might be able to do that through talking about some statistical concepts in kind of a general overall view manner, or through talking about non-statistical concepts. So they're looking at communication skills, and they're also looking at, how well will you fit in with their organization. So when assessing an individual's statistical knowledge, when I'm talking about, when they're not getting too in depth, you might be just simply like, do you have experience with generalized linear mixed models? And so, how do you respond? So, well, yes, I talked about it some in my Stat 821 and 822 class. Dr. Walt Stroop is one of the leaders in that area. He's the one who taught us the topics. And that might be just enough. Just leave it at that. What software packages have you used in your courses? Okay, well, I've used R, I've used SAS. Maybe talk a little bit about what you've done. I've used, maybe some procedures, whatever functions in R, but not necessarily in too depth. Now, at times I have seen, but I think this is more this happens less often, is that the people who are interviewing will go into details, like, for example, like a question that you might have even on an exam. How could one use product limits to test the significance of the difference between means? Okay, so you might have to talk about various things, maybe like a contrast statement or something like that. And then what is the difference between S3 and S4 and R? So this is evaluating your understanding of how R works. And for those of you who are in my 850 class, we have not talked about that yet, but we will later this week. So those are more specific questions. But as I say here, the general questions are a lot more common. And part of the reason is that, and you'll find this for interviewing for a regular job, not just an internship, is that companies see that you have a master's in statistics or a PhD in statistics from a known university. And so they understand that you know the statistics part. Okay, you have that done already. What they don't know, because that degree doesn't necessarily directly evaluate this, is your ability to communicate, ability to work with others, ability to fit in an organization. That's what they don't know. And so often the interviews focus on those kinds of topics more often. So, assessing individual non-statistical qualities, standard interview questions. I mean, there's websites out there that have these kinds of things out there, so I won't go into all of these. Why do you want to work for us? Well, hopefully you have an answer to that. Don't just say, well, I don't know, I just want to get an internship, I want to get some experience. Well, tell us why, something like, well, if it's a pharmaceutical company. I'm very interested in the pharmaceutical industry. I'm very interested in getting experience with clinical trials and being able to analyze the data, the corresponding to the clinical trials, and go into a little bit of detail in your response. What would you like to do with your degree? Well, be rich. Obviously don't say that. I want to get a job. Tell us what you want to do. Like with the pharmaceutical industry, for example. You can say something like, well, one thing that I've always wanted to do in my career is to somehow help others. And, with a statistics degree, one of the areas that I see that one can help others is through working with the pharmaceutical industry, helping to develop new drugs so that they will provide help to others. Okay, that's why I want to go into the pharmaceutical industry. Something like that. Then you have questions like this. Describe a conflict or disagreement that you've had with a coworker in the past and how you have resolved it. I hate that question. Have you ever seen that kind of a question before? Well, I don't have conflicts with others. Unfortunately, you can't really say that. What can you say? A lot of you are teaching. One thing that you can do is talk about your teaching. That a student, disagreed with a grade on a particular problem on a test or something like that. You can go into how you've handled this in a professional manner. Acknowledge that the student, might feel one way, but in the end, the true answer is this. And how do you handle this? Yes.
Should your answer to that be relevant to your statistician life, or could you be well, when I worked at McDonald's as an undergrad? I think that's completely fine. Okay. Again, what they're looking at as well. How do you work with others? I think it's fine to give even both. The key thing is with those kinds of questions, and the next one, what are your weaknesses? I don't like that question either. Turn. What they're looking for, essentially this is kind of a negative kind of question. Turn that into a positive. My weakness was, maybe you could describe something, maybe a course that you did poorly as an undergraduate, okay? And then what you can say, then you can talk about, well, on my own, I studied really hard. And here's a better example. So, for example, when I was an undergrad, I wanted to be an actuary. And the very first actuary exam that I took was, at the time, was the first exam that everyone took, was over 3 calculus semesters and linear algebra. I got a 5 on it in terms of my grade. If you know anything about actuarial exam testing, it's graded from 1 to 10, or 6 and above is passing. Okay. So, my weakness was, I didn't understand the material as well as I should. So what did I do? Well, I retook it, and I made sure that I studied enough. I did the old actuarial study exam technique of, I kept track of all my hours, and I had probably 150 hours that I studied for it. I made sure that I studied enough for it, and what did I get the second time around? A 10. Okay? So I've turned that weakness now into a positive. Obviously, it all depends upon your own life, your own setting, what that is. But try to make some kind of positive out of it in the end. Excuse me. Okay, let's see here. Okay, I've already talked about that. And it's just not internships. Even like when we interview faculty here, people for faculty positions, we're looking at how would they fit in. Not necessarily the statistical qualities, but the non-statistical qualities. We've interviewed some strange people, to be honest. We're not going to hire that person, okay? Even if they might be extremely great in research, extremely great in teaching or whatever, we're not going to hire that person. We're looking at how will they fit in, or and again, this is more in terms of a non-internship, a regular job. We're looking at why will this person hopefully stay here in 2 or 3 years? You can say, well, I'm from this area. Okay, highlight that. Or try to give a person or a person you're interviewing with some reason why you will actually stay in this case, Nebraska. And that will go a long way towards you being hired. Because as we've seen, with in statistics, in industry, people jump from one job to the next because there's such a need for statisticians. It's easy to find that next job. And so, from a company's perspective, that can be difficult because now you're taking all this time having to interview people, retrain people that you have to hire every 2 to 3 years. And if you can give some reason why you want to stay, that can be helpful to get hired. Okay, so where do these interviews take place? Well, you're not going to be fly out to, let's say, the East Coast to interview with some pharmaceutical company. They're not going to do that. This is an internship, not like a regular job. And so typically it's over a phone, it's over Skype, and those are the typical ways that you're interviewed. Oftentimes there will be multiple interviewers at the same time interviewing you. I never thought that would be an issue, but I know my very first interview for a statistics internship, it was over the phone, and it was a conference call, so there was like 3 people in some room in someplace in Iowa that were interviewing me, and I when I was interviewing with them, I had troubles breathing. I don't know why, but it was just weird to be talking to 3 people at the same time. I couldn't see them, and I think in my back of my head I was going, oh, I bet they're talking amongst each other, talking about, oh, this person didn't, respond well to that question or something like that, and I admit, I didn't interview very well that day. But, just be aware that can happen and moved on, and I did better in the future. Do not ask questions about salary level. This is first of all, it's an internship. There's very little leeway, to ask for more money. I mean, in any kind of regular job that you're interviewing for, you should always ask for more money. Very often, I know this happens all the time here when we interview for a faculty position, is that we are given a range and a salary range. And are we going to give a salary range to offer from? Are we going to go from the top from our first offer? No. We're going to go somewhere towards the middle, somewhere towards the bottom, because we expect that person to ask for more money. Do they always? No, unfortunately. Well, for them. But always ask for more money in a regular job interview setting. You can't do that with an internship. At least I've never heard of anybody ever doing that with an internship. And I don't think it really makes sense. Well, how much should you expect? Well, in terms of get paid. If you have a master's degree, well, you should expect to be paid at the master's level. If you're maybe very close to getting a PhD, you should expect to get a pay similar at the PhD level. For many of you, you're in your first year of grad school. What should you expect to be paid? Well, obviously at least at the bachelor's level, maybe up to the master's level in terms of like a regular salary at a regular job. And, that can be very lucrative for poor graduate students. Just to give you an example, so like with both of my statistics internships, I made more during the summer, one, I made more during the summer than I did during my entire 9-month TA. Okay? The other job, it was probably about the same. It's hard to say because it was actually a fellowship, and there was some tax considerations. And depending upon how you factor in taxes, it corresponds to if that was more or not. But when you think about that, in terms of those of you who are TAs here, you can actually earn just as much in one summer as you do during 9 months. It is rare to have unpaid internships in statistics, unlike maybe in other areas. I've never heard of an unpaid internship. On your interview, always be prepared to ask your own questions. At the end of the interview, you typically will be asked, "Well, do you have any questions?" Don't say, "No, I don't." Well, they're looking for communication skills there. And, what you often need to do is go research have some company-related questions ready to go that you could ask at the end of the interview. So, just do some Google searching, understand the company's business for the company that you're interviewing with, so you have some questions ready to go. Now, obviously, then during the interview, too, some questions might come up, and, of course, you can ask those as well. But always have some kind of question ready to go. Always email your primary contact at a company that you're interviewing with after the interview to thank them and re-express your interest in working there. Again, this shows that, hey, you want this job. They're more likely to hire someone who wants the job, who has demonstrated interest in the job, than someone who maybe even be more qualified who, doesn't really care. And I think this also is important, is that, demonstrate how you have gone beyond basic requirements in a course or other job in the past. You can just think of it from this perspective that, an employer, wants to hire somebody who shows a lot of interest in what they're doing, and somebody who's just going to go beyond the minimum standards. They want somebody who goes beyond that. And so, you could, be ready in terms of the questions that you're asked during the interview to somehow interject some examples in the past of where you have gone beyond, what was needed. Like, for example, maybe what you've done in a course to better understand a topic beyond what was expected. Or maybe how you produce extra plots or additional analyses on a consulting problem to provide better insight for the client than maybe what was actually needed. Excuse me. And lastly, learn about the people you're interviewing. You're going to know what their names are. Google them. Learn about them, and especially if they have common interests, that can be a great place for small talk. Again, they're evaluating communication skills, ability to fit in an environment, and if you can just, talk about a subject that's not related at all to statistics, hey, this is a colleague that, I can, not just talk about with job stuff with, I can talk with non-job stuff. At least for me, what I often do is, think about sports. If I'm interviewing with someone in Kansas City, I might say, hey, are you a Chiefs fan? And so then we can talk about Kansas City Chiefs football. Okay, so how can you get the most out of your internship? So what should you do prior to the internship? Well, number one thing you have to do is find a place to live. I mean, think about this. You might be living in a city that you've never been before, and you're going to be there for like 3 months. How many, 3-month leases for apartments have you ever had before in your lives? Probably none. Okay? So, it's often a very difficult, well, I shouldn't say difficult. It's something that it can be complicated. I think that's the best way to put it. Now, fortunately, especially if you're working with a big company, the big company is going to have some company-owned or contracted housing. So this happened with my first statistical internship. I could have lived in their housing. Instead, I was able to live with a friend, and this was in Kansas City. And in the end, the actual rent that you have to pay usually is kind of high, relatively speaking to like maybe what you're used to here in Lincoln or maybe other places where you've lived, because it's a temporary situation, and because of that temporary situation, you often have to pay a premium. Human resources departments obviously can provide leads as well. Now, of course, there's many different websites out there where you can find apartment listings, and that's a great thing that we have available to us now. For my second statistical internship, and I know I talk a lot about what I've done in the past, but I think these are important stories. So I had an internship at the Idaho National Laboratory, Government Department of Energy Laboratory out in Idaho Falls, Idaho. The farthest west I had ever been in my life was western Kansas before that. And so I went to Idaho Falls. Is a city of about 50,000 people. This was 1997. There weren't really a whole lot of apartment listings online at that time. And so what I did was I drove about a day and a half, 16-hour drive from Omaha out to Idaho Falls, Memorial Day weekend, went through a snowstorm in the Laramie, Cheyenne, Wyoming area. I got out there a week before I was going to start working. I had a week to find an apartment in a city that I knew nothing about, really. Fortunately, I was able to find something, and also it was furnished. So that's something else to think about, that you're not going to probably want to cart a whole bunch of furniture out with you for someplace you're going to live for like 2.5, 3 months. A great other option that one can consider is university housing. Most cities that you're going to work in is going to have a university there. The students go home for the summer. Okay? These universities very frequently will rent out their rooms in their dorms, their residence halls, to typically other students that need it for some reason. And so this is a great place that you can go to find temporary housing. Again, as I said, expect your rent to be higher than what you would normally pay, and also just realize that you probably will want to keep if you're living in an apartment here in Lincoln, you will probably want to keep that apartment in Lincoln during the summer too. So you're paying rent in Lincoln, and you're paying rent at some other city that you're living in for your internship. So you're paying 2 rents. I had to do that for my internships. But the key thing is, though, because of how much money you're going to be making at these internships, it is quite affordable to do something like that. Okay? Well, what about international students and doing these internships? I've already had some questions about this. And international students can still go get an internship. The key is that you got to fill out the paperwork associated with the Curricular Practical Training Program. And basically what this says to the U.S. government is that, hey, you're getting some practical training, and it's just going to be at a job rather than at the university itself. And the government then expects you to also take a corresponding course to it. Typically, students will take one of these 2 courses. What you can do, for example, is set up an 892. This is our topics course. Set up an 892 section with your advisor. Just sign up for that course, and the advisor might make some additional requirements to actually take in the course. And like what I've done in the past is I told a student who's doing this is that when you get back, that within that first month, give a Department of Statistics seminar about your internship experience. Okay. And I recommend just signing up for it, pass, no pass. There's no reason to have a letter grade with something like this. Obviously, it's kind of hard to assess. Do you get an A for your internships, or do you get a B? Anyway, so here's some more information regarding that. Obviously, prior to your internship too, it might be helpful to review some stuff some statistical methods that you know will be used so that you're ready to go. Okay, well, what about during the internship? Well, what I have found is that there are typically two main reasons to offer an internship from a company's perspective, and that is to provide a learning experience to a student. In other words, like a service to the statistical community. That's a reason to give an internship, where they're not necessarily expecting you to complete any work. I mean, sure, it would be nice if you did, but they're doing this to help benefit students. That's a great reason to do something like this. And before I started having internships, I never really thought of that as a reason to give an internship to a student. That they're just simply, doing it as a service. The other reason is to get work done that is not normally, where there's not necessarily time available to complete. And basically both my internships were like this, although one of my internships was closer to that, where, obviously for various reasons, the company just doesn't have time to do something, and they want to maybe do a further investigation or something, and they'll decide, hey, let's just give it to an intern and let them go at it and see what happens. If nothing happens, okay, well, we didn't really lose much from it. Just to give you an example, so my pharmaceutical company internship was a lot more learning experience. So, while I had work that I was given, the company made sure that I was able to attend various seminars on just the drug application process itself. I got to see the manufacturing plant, where I actually got to see a pill press that they use to actually create the pills that people would consume. I got to see, if you ever heard of Ozcal calcium supplements? I got to see the actual seashells that they use, that they grind up to use an Ozcal calcium supplement pill. I mean, those are cool experiences to have, and it goes beyond just the statistics itself. Like with my Idaho National Laboratory internships, it was more this part right here rather than learning experience, but I did get some nice learning experience stuff, such as I got to the Idaho National Laboratory. If I was working, was in Idaho Falls, but about 40 miles into the desert, they had a big test facility where they would test like nuclear reactors and stuff like that. And so, for example, I got to walk right next to a huge, I would say, not Olympic-sized pool, maybe half the size of an Olympic-sized pool. That in the pool itself, they would have the old, what do they call them, like nuclear rods, where they would have uranium in them that came from nuclear reactors. I got to walk right by it. I got to have a bus ride through a low-level nuclear waste dump. Those are really great experiences to have that you're just not going to have necessarily in a classroom. Now, in some respect too, your internship is what you make of it, and so here are some recommendations of stuff that I found to work out very well, and that is make sure you talk to your coworkers. It's very easy for a student to just go into their cubicle, sit there for 8 hours, and then leave after they're done with their workday. Don't just do that. Get up, walk around, talk to your fellow coworkers. And I've seen this because I've been in situations where I've seen other interns, and they're not really communicating. They're just still focused on getting the statistics part done. But what I would do in my statistics internships, I would set up 30-minute discussions with each statistician that I work with, especially or in my department, especially the ones I didn't necessarily have day-to-day contact with. And I would simply ask them, tell me about what you do. I want to learn. Because I find this stuff interesting. I want to get understand some of the experiences that you have, and so I can learn more about what a statistician does. And I found these discussions very, very helpful. I even would do this with some non-statisticians. Like this was the first time ever that I even got to talk to an epidemiologist. You know, what's the difference between epidemiology and statistics? Okay, I had that person explain it to me, and you know, it was quite interesting. Okay, so I guess we've already done the tours of company facilities in some respect. Again, the internship is what you make of it. And this is a great opportunity then to learn new statistical methods or programming tools inside the office, but even outside the office. I'll give you an example. So I think, at least in my my education that I had at Kansas State, and you still see this in Department of Statistics now, but maybe not as much so. You know, it was often thought the computing side was just something, okay, you can figure it out on your own. You know, we don't need to really teach this on class. Figure it out on your own. It's just computing. It's just programming. And so, you know, after my second year, my second year in the graduate program, you know, I knew a little bit of how to do plots in SAS, not much, you know, and so one thing, this was after my third year. So one thing that I did was, since I was doing a lot of plots for one of the projects I was working on, I grabbed the SAS graph manual. So, you know, back in the day, you know, you didn't have all the help files, all the manuals online, and so there were like a book for SAS graph about that high, about that size. It was huge, and it would be basically for every component of SAS. There would be a SAS graph manual. SAS stat would actually have 2 of those. Huge books. I mean, if you put all the SAS manuals, stack them up, you know, it'd probably be this high. Okay? And so what I did was I took the SAS graph manual home, back to my apartment, and I read the whole thing. And I became very, very knowledgeable about SAS graph. Then when I got back that following fall for my internship, I could do a lot more with it in my courses, more so than any other student that was in my department. And those are the kinds of things that can really put you, you know, give you a leg up in your graduate careers to do stuff like that. Of course, take some time off, explore the area where you are living. So, like for example, one thing I did was I went to Yellowstone Park a couple times when I was living in Idaho. Now, some non-educational benefits in terms of money. You know, some companies, even though you're an intern, will allow you to still sign up for the retirement program. It's like a 401k plan. And this happened on one of my internships. And you might be thinking, well, why do I care about that? I'm still a student. Yeah, I'm going to retire sometime. But why do I even care about signing up for a retirement plan? Well, I don't. In the end, big deal if you use that money for retirement or not. It's free money, essentially. So, you know, with 401k plans, in case you don't know, typically a company will say, okay, you put, let's say, 5% of your salary into it. And we'll put 5%, we'll match that. We'll put another 5% of your salary in. And the only way that you get that is to participate in the plan. And so that's what I did with one of my companies and that I worked with. And so, you know, I got, I don't know how much extra money that I got. And in the end, if I wanted to, I could still take it out of the retirement plan. And, yeah, there would be a tax penalty, but I would still have money left over. So it was a win-win situation no matter what. In the end, I kept it in the retirement plan. I mean, I still remember trying to, for this particular internship, it was myself and a student from Iowa State. We both were interns for this pharmaceutical company, and it took me a while to try to convince her that, no, do this plan because you're going to get money in the end, even if you're not going to use it for retirement. Anyway, a key, and you can see where I emphasize here, make sure to show how useful you are. and how well you get along with everyone. If you do that, they will want to probably hire you when you graduate. And whether or not you actually want to work there, that's a big deal. But it's nice to have opportunities. Also, very often you're going to run into these people, even if you don't work there, you're going to run into these people later on that you have worked with. At conferences, for example, or in other settings. And so it's very nice to make sure that they think, hey, you're good. You know, very often, too, you're going to use them for references when you do find a job maybe someplace else. So what to do after the internship? A key is to always keep in contact with the people the direct people that you worked with there. Again, think of in terms of like references in the future that you might need from them. But again, also maybe for potential job opportunities. Give a seminar on your experiences. We didn't have it this fall, unfortunately, but very often, and this happens in other departments of statistics as well, the students who had an internship that summer, they will give a seminar. Sometimes it's a joint seminar. So like if there was 3 students who had an internship, they'll split it up into thirds. Sometimes there'll be more than one seminar. They'll give a seminar about their experiences. And obviously for the student who got the internship, that gives them presentation practice. But also think of it from the perspective of you should always be trying to give back to the department, give back to other students. Because if other students see what you did, they can learn from your experiences and maybe get an internship themselves in the future. And obviously, too, it looks good to faculty because this shows that you are going beyond normal expectations. Now, you might be thinking, oh, that takes a long time to prepare a seminar. I've never even done a Department of Statistics seminar before. You might be thinking, well, a key is that typically in any place that you do an internship, you're going to have to give like a closing seminar, closing presentation to the people at that company. And so you can just take what you did there and essentially use it here. Okay, scholarly benefits. Even if you're not doing the CPT thing, so if you're a domestic student, you can still get course credit for it. So that's something to think about. You know, it's maybe one less course to take that will allow you to maybe focus on the other courses. You know, being able to apply knowledge received from internships to your coursework is very, very, very helpful. Even research topics can be motivated by your internship experiences. And even scholarship and fellowship applications can greatly benefit from your internship experiences because, you know, essentially it's an honor to get an internship. And I know after both my statistics internships, I was able to get two scholarships where I know at least one of them was heavily influenced by the fact that I had a pharmaceutical company internship beforehand. Okay, so some final comments. I know it's a long ways away for some of you, but you know, once you start your dissertation, it is somewhat questionable whether you should pursue an internship because you need to be focused on getting that dissertation done. And doing a dissertation is a lot different from regular old coursework. You know, at the very least, getting the internship will delay your dissertation, delay your graduation by 3 months. Often it's more than that because it's hard to get back into that dissertation work once you've had to put it aside for a while. In the end, it's best to talk to your advisor about it. I've had one of my PhD students before who was very close to finishing. I let him go ahead and, I shouldn't say I let, but I encouraged him to go ahead and take an internship that he had at a pharmaceutical company named Genentech out in San Francisco. The ASA StatTrack website has a lot of good things out there about internship experiences. And well, as I was kind of saying, sometimes internships are actually fellowships, and there are some tax consequences that you have to consider. If you want to know more about that, I can tell you about that. Okay, so that's the end of the internship section. I hope that this has helpful to you. If you're able to get an interview, I would be happy to talk to you more about it and give some additional tips. Any questions? Okay, let's move on to the accreditation section. Okay. So there are many professions out there that require professionals who are, let's say, practicing some discipline, let's say, to be accredited, certified, licensed in some way that shows, indeed, this person is qualified, this person has the experience to do something. Many professions out there. You can think of like an attorney. My wife had to pass the bar exam, for example. Actuaries, they have to pass a number of exams too. Here's an example from a professional engineer. I don't know much about engineering myself, but when I was preparing this set of notes, I thought, well, I want to go and see what some other disciplines do. And I came across this, and I thought this was, there was some good stuff here about, well, why would an engineer who already has, let's say, a bachelor's degree or master's degree or even a PhD, why would they want to be certified as a professional engineer? Anyway, so, here's what it says on the National Society of Professional Engineers website. To a client, it means you've got the credentials to earn their trust. Okay, so you know what to do. To become licensed, engineers must complete a college degree, work as a professional engineer for at least 4 years prior, so they have to have some experience, pass 2 exams, and earn a license. And then after they get that license, they must continually maintain and improve their skills throughout their career. So there's continuing education. Okay. Now, at one point, there was no professional engineer designation. But eventually, people thought, well, for the public health, safety, and welfare, after all, these engineers are involved in building things, and we want to make sure these things are built right. We better have some kind of system set up. Some states started thinking about, and that's what ended up happening. Now, what about statistics? I think we're at a point right now in the statistics profession, such as what engineers face a number of years ago. Obviously, there's a lot more data out there than there were 10, 20 years ago. A lot more types of people trying to analyze it and form conclusions. Sometimes those conclusions are not necessarily correct. So it kind of makes sense, at least from that standpoint, that as a statistician, maybe you have some kind of accreditation that says, yes, you are a practicing statistician, you know what you're doing. And that's what's happening now in statistics, that these a number of statistical societies have come out with now an accreditation process. Now, from what I've seen from the various statistical societies, they're not asking you to go take tests like you would as an actuary or maybe in other areas. Rather, they're looking for, do you have a degree in what's called statistics? And do you have some experience? Okay, so what I'm going to do here is talk about where we are in terms of accreditation for statisticians. Right now, at least in the United States, I think we're behind other countries in what they've done for their accreditation. It is still kind of small. But I definitely wanted to talk about this topic in this class because I think this is something that's going to get bigger. And also I think it is something that I think all statisticians should seriously consider about doing. Okay. Excuse me. So it wasn't until 2010 that the ASA offered some kind of accreditation. Now, back when I was a student, in the mid-1990s, accreditation, that was a big topic of discussion. And my feeling at the time was, oh, I don't want to have to jump over another hurdle, jump through another hoop, or however you want to put it, just so that I could be a statistician. Why isn't my master's degree, why isn't my PhD degree enough to say, hey, I'm qualified? That was my opinion then, so I was totally against it. But now, since I have graduated, and I have seen certain things, hold on, let me pause this. Okay, we're back. A key, though, is this. Accreditation is not required. Okay? So let's talk some more about the why. I kind of already talked about this right here. Here's another reason why. This is from colleagues of mine who've had these kinds of experiences. I haven't had this experience myself. Imagine that you're in a setting, maybe you're working at a medical center, and you're doing consulting with some medical doctors, okay? And you're helping them set up a design for a clinical trial, or you're helping to analyze some data. What some of my colleagues have told me is that those medical doctors think they're up here, and a statistician is someone who's down here, and that they don't have this. They don't look at each other as equals. Why? Well, that medical doctor has some kind of accreditation, has done some stuff to be licensed to do what he does. A statistician, at least until recently, did not have anything. And so one reason why to have accreditation as a statistician is to say, hey, I'm an accredited statistician, you're an accredited medical doctor, you're an accredited engineer, you're an accredited whatever. We are equals. And that can go a long ways for some people who maybe are not as professional as they should be. AMSAT News recently AMSAT News in August 2013 attempted to talk about this and talk about the why. And this is something that you can read on your own. I have some stuff here that I've highlighted. And so let's talk about some of this here. So, viewed from the profession, accreditation testifies that there is a body of knowledge known as statistics that accredited practitioners must be well versed in. That knowledge at an advanced level, and must have applied it competently and ethically. So notice the ethics in there. Through practice for several years to be considered a professional. And, again, continuing education. You're making sure that you know what's currently the best things out there to do as a statistician. Other professionals, architects, doctors, engineers, lawyers, all have to be accredited, obviously in a lot of different ways, in some way. And so anyway, so that's why we're doing this. So in summary for this blurb from AMSAT News, you've demonstrated understanding of the area, you do ethical practice, and you do continuing education. That's why accreditation is important. Now, there's a number of levels. Well, there's 2 levels of accreditation for the American Statistical Association. Unfortunately, we are out of time, so we will start talking about that next time. Are there any questions? Okay, that's it for today.